December 10th, 2003. My frozen hands trembled as I fumbled to work my little butane lighter. The tips of my fingers are raw and bloodied already, and I wince in pain with every failed attempt to spark a flame. Finally, I achieve a jittery fire which impatiently dances atop the lighter. I carefully lower it to my pile of kindling, and the fire cautiously creeps out and spreads until it is a healthy size. I watch it for a while, tending to it until it's strong. Now there is enough light to see around me, and enough heat to survive the night. Here, deep in the forest, with everything frozen and quiet, the only light and sound comes from my fire. It is the whole world to me right now. It dances and sings in a raspy, crackling voice to me, and I am happy to enjoy its company. I can almost imagine that I can hear it whispering and babbling happily. It's so cold. I must be tired. I'm hearing things. The popping and sizzling of the fire is really beginning to sound like words. Maybe I'm just lonely out here. Maybe I just really want someone to talk to. So I'm hearing coherence in the chaos of the fire. I could have sworn I heard it say, "It's so cold." There it was again, softer this time. I lean closer to the blaze, and its warmth caresses my face, setting me at ease. I'm listening intently now, anxious for what I'll hear next. "If you let me die tonight, you'll die tonight." Okay, there was no mistaking it. It said it clearly, albeit in the raspy sing-song voice of a fire consuming wet branches, because we all know that sound. Yet even as the words became clearer, they became softer, to draw me in closer to make out the next statement. The warmth splashes over me as I inch my face closer and closer, and the frost that had settled in my bones begins to thaw. The fire is speaking constantly now, chattering quietly to itself, and I can only pick out bits of words and portions of sentences. "Get closer. Watch closely. If I die, you die. I'm the only thing keeping you alive. Pay attention." The fire ends its tirade with a loud snap of burning wood, and then is quiet. I lean in even closer, eager to receive whatever secret is coming next. The heat is no longer pleasant. It sears me as the flames playfully lick at my face. The fire is being coy, teasing me with its silence to see how long I will wait on it. The smoke reaches into my nostrils, and the embers float carelessly from the heart of the fire into my eyes, which are now welling with ash. I don't care. I just want to hear what comes next. Get closer. Pay attention. Watch closely. Now, more than ever. December 17th, 2003. In other news, the charred body of an unidentified man was found deep in the mountain forests of the city. Investigators have stated that the man appeared to have caught fire while sitting by his campfire, and inexplicably did not appear to have made any effort to extinguish himself. His burned remains were found, frozen in position by the icy temperatures, leaning over the ashes of a long extinguished fire in what is most perhaps the most bizarre detail of the grisly scene. The man is reported to have been found with an expectant, smile still on his face. A house of terror. The car finally gave out. Jeff hit the dashboard in frustration. It was bad enough that the car had to break down, but at night, in the rain, in the middle of God knows wherever the fuck he was, it was a fitting end to his bad week. The week had seen his wife leave him, taking the kids with her. He got demoted at his job, and he was forced to go back on the road as a salesman. Now, this. Obviously. And things were not going to get any better anytime soon. Jeff decided that he might as well try to just find a way out of this mess. Okay, so waiting in the car for another car to come by to help. Yeah, this isn't a road that's used often, though. That could take, at best, hours. Okay. So Jeff decided to walk first down the road to see if there were any other choices. So after walking about half an hour, in the pounding rain, Jeff finally came across an old house on the edge of the woods. Now, Jeff had seen enough horror movies to make him turn back. But this rain was pounding. It was enough to override his sense of fear and trepidation. So he walked up the winding driveway to the door. The house looked to be very old, and it wasn't kept up very well. Jeff started to get worried that maybe no one lived there at all. But he knocked on the door, and to his surprise, it was answered. Actually, pretty quickly. An older man, probably in his late 70s, asked him what he wanted. So Jeff explains his situation and asks if the man had a phone or some form of communication that he could reach out for help. The old man chuckled and said he was wary of travelers. But Jeff seems to look honest enough, so he'll let him use his phone. Jeff thanked him and asked his name. The older man said, Joseph Palmer. And Jeff took the number of the nearest garage. Jeff made his way through the living room to the phone, noticing that the house looked about as old inside as it did outside. And he was actually a little surprised that there was a phone working. But he called the garage, and they said there was nothing they could do until the morning, which makes sense. But they would meet him around noon at his car. Mr. Palmer offered Jeff the guest room to sleep in for the night. Now, Jeff was a bit wary spending the night in a spooky old house, but that rain and sleeping in the car, and he'd have to walk back to the car to sleep in. So yeah, he accepted. And Mr. Palmer shows him to his room. Now, the house was adorned with antique everything. Not a piece of furniture seemed to have been purchased in at least the last 60 years or more. Mr. Palmer showed him the room and bidded him a good night. Mr. Palmer was nice, but the whole situation just left Jeff unnerved. Creepy old house, edge of the woods, the rain. He's just tired. He had watched way too many horror movies and just chill. The bedroom had a canopy bed, one lamp, a single window, and a red carpet that didn't seem to match the rest of the room. The house was eerily quiet as Jeff laid himself down on the bed, except for a creak here and a thump there. But Jeff's imagination had him way too paranoid to sleep, as he heard Mr. Palmer outside the room, walking up and down the hallway outside. Up he went and down he went, and then the footsteps stopped right outside his room. Jeff waited, but nothing happened. A half hour passed, and yet he heard nothing except that damn rain beating on the roof and the wind howling. Finally, sleep slowly overcame Jeff. Even with his paranoia and nervousness, slowly his eyes closed. Although, as he was just falling asleep, he thought he could almost hear something scratching at the door. Jeff awoke, and the storm had passed, and the daylight was shining through. Happy that all his nervousness and paranoia was for nothing, Jeff got out of bed, checked his watch. He'd slept until 11:20. He's gonna have to leave quickly if he's gonna make that 30-minute walk back to the car. Leaving the room, he's greeted by Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer asked him if he slept well. Jeff said, "Yeah, actually I did. I had trouble falling asleep. Once I fell asleep, I was good to go." Mr. Palmer laughed and asked if he was afraid of the old house in the middle of the night. Jeff admitted that maybe, as silly as he felt, it does match some horror movies. He thanked Mr. Palmer, said he had to leave quickly to get to his car, and he turned to leave when suddenly he felt a sharp pain on his head, and everything was dark. When Jeff came to, he was tied to a chair in the basement. The place reeked of horrible smells. Mr. Palmer walked up to him with a large knife in his hand, and Jeff screamed and tried to free himself, but he was just tearing himself up. He looked up in horror at Mr. Palmer and asking him why. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" Palmer answered that last night he would have been nervous, full of fear, waiting for an attack. Palmer said that wouldn't do. No, that wasn't the right time. Everyone expects attacks at night. But in the morning, people are relaxed. The fear is gone. Jeff asked him again, "Why are you doing this? What are you going to do with me?" "The garage people, they're expecting me." Mr. Palmer said that mishaps happen on highways at night, mainly during storms, so hardly anyone would think twice as to why he was gone. If anyone did start asking questions, he had ways to discourage that kind of activity. As far as why he was doing this, he simply said, "Jeff, you don't need to worry about that. In fact, you don't need to worry about anything else ever again." Jeff looked into Mr. Palmer's eyes as he walked towards him. His eyes were blank, and Jeff tried to scream, but Camp Royanea, the Boy Scout camp where I worked, has been around for many, many years. 86 years to be exact. However, what people often forget is prior to becoming a Boy Scout camp, this place was called the Watson Ranch. And before that, it was controlled and inhabited by the Pomo Native American tribe. Hopefully I'm saying Pomo properly. One thing that is worth noting about the Pomo tribes of this particular area is that they were famous for their detailed legends, both about the area and its denizens, and these legends spanned from tales of creation to epic tales explaining exactly why the Chinook salmon of the Russian River swim upstream, and tales of how the coyote stole the sun to gift the Pomo fire. However, perhaps the most notable thing about the legends of the Pomo people is that all of them seem to explain in some way things about life. But many of them science is yet to explain. Specifically, though, this particular tale deals with the monstrosity which the Pomo call Ichthos melanos, a word that seems exceptionally out of place in any language, including the native tongue of the Pomo. Furthermore, it has been claimed that the letters which made up this monstrosity's name were not of this world themselves, and thus the pronounced version of Ichthos melanos' name is undoubtedly a perversion of the true name. The Pomo also claimed, however, that Ichthos' nature was so horrible and so different that thinking too hard about his nature or concentrating on the deadly enigma of his existence was enough to give the bravest men nightmares and drive the lesser ones to insanity. It was, however, said that Ichthos' form was similar in basic form to that of an extremely tall, warped man, but differed drastically in appearance, his face bearing a triangular shape with black, beady eyes, which seemed to hold answers to horrible questions. Questions that no one would dare ask. And his long, ghastly, crab-like arms and legs, each with long black nails, would allow him, actually I should say it, to move in such a way that no animal on this planet would ever naturally move, his movements being closest to that of a crab, but his speed and poise being that similar to a panther and a diamondback rattler. It is also notable that throughout the land surrounding the river, there are hundreds of both stone and wood carvings of this monstrosity, known to invoke nightmares in even those who not know of what they look upon. But perhaps the most horrifying thing of all was the fact that Ichthos was said to dwell entirely in one's peripheral vision, just outside of the corner of the eyes. Now, as with all things, the Pomo's reign over this land was temporary. And when the white man came and settled this land, many of the great legends and stories of the Pomo disappeared. And legends of creatures such as Ichthos were only spoken of in whispers and by the occasional drunken ranch hand or prospector at campfires down by the river. Nonetheless, many a soul continued to disappear. Many a soul died near the river. though their deaths were chalked up to negligence or stupidity or foul play, and many of it was associated with gold miners. Still, in a few circles, the legend of Ichthos Melanos, the monster of the river, and its tributaries survived the death of the Pomo people. And in the late 1950s, 2 Camp Royanea staff members, James Jim Donnelly and Humphrey Johnny Roman, discovered the legend and decided to bring it back and would use it to frighten children down near the area of the river, near the old canoe base, which was called the Plunge. Humphrey, or Johnny, I'm not sure why it was Johnny, was an expert storyteller, and he would tell the kids about the monster, describing all of its horrifying qualities. And out of the water he would emerge, wearing a rubber mask and a tarp in order to look similar to how they described Ichthos. And then he would be pulled under the water. Now this little prank of theirs continued, and it caught the attention of the camp director at the time, Steve Johansson. Now during the 4th week of the 1991 season, he came to watch them pull off the little masquerade. The story proceeded with Johnny performing the many theatrics of the story. And then, on cue, out of the water, emerged the figure, clad in the tarp and the rubber mask. Grabbed Johnny, dragging him into the water. The children then, as they had each and every week, ran back up, screaming, startled. The camp director, however, stayed behind to congratulate the 2 staff members on their fantastic prank. This is what gives them stories to tell when they're older. However, after waiting about 10 minutes, no one showed up. He went down to the river to look for those 2 staff members, thinking they just went up another path. Couldn't figure it out. So he went quickly to look down the plunge, just to make sure they left. And that's when he saw a red mist filling up the water. And he looked in closely. And that's when he saw Jim Donnelly, his hands and face covered in blood, muttering, Ichthos Melanos, Alegos Nichos. After that, James Donnelly was committed to a psychiatric health center, the one in Cazadero County. And to this day, there's 2 main theories on what happened. Either Jim had a pre-existing mental condition, and that caused him to murder Johnny, or something actually happened in the water. Something butchered Johnny in front of him, and that drove him insane. I don't know. But I don't want to mess around with Ichthos Melanos.